Now, and I think we are live. Welcome back to the FRENS VALIDATOR YouTube channel. I'm your host and co-founder of FRENS VALIDATOR, Yuri Maibom, and today I'm sitting here together with Eric Chen, the CEO of Injective. Hey, Eric, it has been a while, but yeah, thanks for joining.
Hey, really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I think today we have a lot of things to discuss in terms of sector-specific blockchains. This is the focus of today's episode. And yeah, I'm very, very excited about this because, I mean, this is like a narrative that is popping up right now. But before we do that, I want to start completely from scratch here. So that everyone is really on one page here. But let's start at the beginning. At Cosmoverse 2022, you said something during your keynote. You started working on Injective since you are like passionate about finance and cryptography, and building a DEX, made sense for you because it was like the ideal combination. So this was like what you have said in your keynote. So can you tell us more about the DEX that you were building back then, and could you walk us through your product and the product's vision in the beginning? And obviously we would also talk about perpetual products here, but could you like get us on one page before we dive deeper? So what was your initial vision when starting Injective?
Yeah, I think, that then I would have to take a time machine back to, 2018 or, even earlier than that, 2017. And back in the day, we were really, like an application in search for an infrastructure. Um, Basically, if we were, trying to build like a fully decentralized, fully on-chain, fair and secure order book-based exchange with a lot of, limitless possibility to unlock and to aggregate as much liquidity as possible in the most efficient manner as possible. And roughly around that time, that's also when, Uniswap was first conceptualized and, had their like first iteration. But we realized that, um, basically with a lot of the existing players within the decentralized exchange landscape, before DeFi even was coined as a term, uh, they were highly ineffective, and the overall user experience for both the user end, but more importantly for algorithmic trader and also for market maker end, which spills down to user engagement, is simply lacking because the cost of order placement and order execution is very, very immense. And also there are a lot of, uh, inefficiencies and costs, implied behind, placing an order, canceling an order, or, executing, different types of strategies. And it became very, very clear early on that the only way to kind of do this properly, um, kind of regardless of how much Ethereum scales, or whether there are any type of highly performant or high throughput EVM environment, it's simply impossible to kind of place such application or such infrastructural tool within a generalized or a holistic layer. And the reason for that is quite simple. Placing an order, canceling an order, matching cross orders are all extremely expensive within the context of EVM. And there are simply no easy hard and fast ways around it, and that's not even mentioning MEV. And that's why Uniswap came about to kind of make it a much more like Ethereum native or like a EVM kind of advocate for implementation of these liquidity aggregation and also matching process. But for a truly capital efficient and for a truly liquid and performant infrastructure to be built, it requires us to build like an chain or basically like an infra from the ground up. And that was kind of like the initial vision. It's like starting off as like a application in search for a home. We decided to build the home ourselves, and certainly Injective has evolved far beyond that, and we definitely saw the vision for and the potential behind Injective since the beginning. Once we decided to go down building the infrastructure, because all the composability, all the implications of shared and performant order book layer, and a truly algorithmic trader or sophisticated user friendly environment. All those things are extremely important for DeFi to kind of break out on the localized innovation within the EVM environment and to get to the next stage of evolution. And certainly, there has been and will be a lot of exciting innovation within Ethereum DeFi, but we noticed that a lot of the bleeding edge applications and use cases are fundamentally blocked by limitations within not just building within EVM, but also building within a generalized environment. And that's kind of how Injective started off to be. And I'm also glad to say that the vision has been pretty much consistent throughout the entire building journey.
I loved how you said that you decided to build the home base by your own. And you also mentioned that you were running into some MEV problems on Ethereum. But at Cosmos 2022, you also mentioned composability problems when building on Ethereum directly. So composability is like a term that is popping up on Twitter all the time. So could you first explain what composability is all about, and then continue by what composability problems you were facing and why it made sense for you to build your own blockchain because of that?
Yeah, I'll try to kind of walk through this in a more layman approach for this. But basically, that this kind of falls in line with the potential behind building the infrastructure when we were taking a crack at it in the beginning, which is kind of like the composability aspect of things. And this means that now you have this infrastructure, now you have this home, now you can invite a lot of people into it. You can invite a lot of projects into it, or maybe to extrapolate on like a wider perspective. You have this plot of land, and now you can build different types of building or like cities that are sharing the same infrastructure, that are sharing the same public utility, and build really really strongly coupled and really, really powerful applications that are kind of synergizing with other buildings within the city. And composability works like that, right? With different types of applications leveraging existing primitives and building on top of existing primitives, or other applications that are possible because there's the existence of another protocol or project or application that are already built with meaningful level of adoption. And for Injective's case, basically one of the issue when it comes to building like a on-chain order book layer is the lack of composability if you go down the scaling solution approach, which means you could be doing it through traditionally, let's say like ZK rollups, or different types of customized rollup solutions, or building different types of kind of specialized execution environment. But the problem behind that is that other applications can't leverage it, other applications can't tap into it, and if you're like an application on top of Ethereum, you can't really act as a smart contract and execute or take advantage of the liquidity that's kind of congregating on top of that scaling solution. So the loss of composability is very, very immense. And that's not even mentioning the fact that basically for a lot of the scaling solutions, let's say, optimistic rollup, et cetera, there's a 7-day exit period. So it means that, you completely lose any type of round trip or atomicity property within it. So basically for Injective's case, one of the most beautiful things that more and more developers are taking notice of is that it has an inherent built-in bridge. So this means that once you're an application on, let's say, Ethereum, you can submit instructions along with any type of assets or tokens into the Injective chain, and you can deploy contracts that handle these types of instructions, and then maybe even like revert back onto the Ethereum chain. So this means, let's say, I'm an asset management protocol, or I'm like a lending protocol, etc., and I need to tap into the capital efficient liquidity on top of Injective. So I can simply send like a transaction on Ethereum to the Injective bridge, and then the bridging process will happen along with the asset. But along with that is kind of like telling the contract on Injective what to do once it lands. So let's say it lands and it wants to execute a buy order, or it wants to take out a lending position, etc. It does that, and then it can also just bridge back. So for a contracts case, it's almost as if you're not really hopping between chains or making the user do a lot of things. It's all being done automatically, and it's all being done in a decentralized way. Now, there's also another element of composability, which is atomicity, which means that I can execute, and then immediately I get the effect, and then I can keep doing what I'm doing. And obviously, that is one of the drawbacks of building your own infrastructure, is that you lose out on the atomicity aspect of it. But it doesn't mean that there's no tool to kind of alleviate that issue, or to make it more fitting with the existing composability infrastructure. And I think that's one of the most kind of advantageous or beautiful thing about Injective's infrastructure.
Yeah, 100% agree on this. And let us dive a little bit deeper into another narrative that you also introduced to us at Cosmoverse 2022. Before we do that, I think you have some minor issues with your
With the
video,
camera?
but yeah, with the camera. But I think as long as we can hear you well, I think yeah, everything is fine. So yeah, maybe we are
Let me try
lucky.
to
And
fix it for one quick second. But yeah, keep going.
but yeah, yeah, I would just continue with the question. So at Cosmos 2022, you also dive deeper into the evolution of crypto in general, and specifically about Injective. And I found this super interesting. So we have seen the first era of DeFi by dApps launching on Ethereum, and then afterwards dApps were looking for alternatives on Avalanche and so on and so forth. But over and over again, we have seen that these dApps did not only run into scalability problems, but also into customization problems. So this was one of the biggest pain points for dApp developers, because they could not really customize their dApps as they wanted to, since their dApps relied on the underlying blockchain, which was Ethereum in that case. And then we have seen this tremendous Cosmos hype, so that we have seen projects launching their own Cosmos blockchains, such as DYDX, and then Osmosis gained a lot of hype. And now all of a sudden we see another hype, which is called sector-specific blockchains. So blockchains that provide an infrastructure for very specific products to launch on them. And Injective is one of them. So a blockchain optimized its infrastructure for one type of product. So can you walk us through this evolution of crypto once again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just a natural evolution of the and honestly, any type of technological environment, or even in traditional environment, the natural evolution of competing standards and kind of competing protocol or primitives, right? In the beginning, you start from a very, very base layer. During the .com era, during the early days of the internet, there's different types of communication protocols, etc. And basically, there's only one that really won out, because that's the one that's most adopted, and people decide to stick with it. And that's kind of a similar case during the early stages of crypto. Is people are trying to come up with different types of base layer environment. People are trying to come up with different types of specific, unique consensus properties, or unique kind of I would say infrastructural properties, etc. And we're still seeing some of it today, but it's being executed in a much more in essentially, effectively speaking, a higher layer. Back then, there were a lot of debate around DAG versus proof of work or proof of stake. Different types of argument around different types of consensus. Whether finality or checkpointing is a hard requirement, etc. And different types of consensus property has also implications behind it. But at this point, it has been roughly kind of I would say stabilized or contained within a few consensus environments, or general properties that people are looking for. And then, people started moving on to, like a higher layer. Let's say, you have this like underlying, whether that be, a generalized proof of stake or like a delegated proof of stake or, different types of consensus models. What do you build on top of it? Like, how do you kind of like show your selling point, or how do you, tailor to the users uh, um, within kind of like your base layer? And this starts to spawn kind of like a competing like VM standards, which means that people are coming up with different types of you know forks of EVM with different types of parameterization. Now, it's obviously a very very quick competition, since it doesn't make sense or it doesn't have significant advantage for a certain ecosystem to simply have another chain that just change a few parameters within EVM. But then you start to see like Solana C-level virtual machine. You start to see move VM. You start to see different types of virtual machine environments, and those are kind of moving more and more towards a kind of like a sector specific destination, right? Because then it's tailoring to a specific class of applications or specific type of decentralized application. Now EVM, it has a lot of inherent properties that might not be the best environment for highly performant applications, or those that require high computation, or doesn't require as much on storage, etc. So then those applications decides to call, let's say, Solana or Aptos or Sui as home, right? But it's still a very much of a generalized environment. They're still looking for the exact same type of primitives to still be built. So even though it might not be the best possible environment for let's say NFT or other types of applications, there are still these type of basic offerings that people are looking for. And then the eventual convergence is that these type of differentiation is most likely not going to be sufficient, because let's say with the Ethereum scaling solutions, with different types of L2 and the roadmap for ETH2 going forward, and different types of roll-up layers coming up with different types of modular execution environments, etc. It also kind of diminishes kind of like the advantages of a lot of these specialized virtual machine environments, because the security property, for example, is clearly not symmetrical to Ethereum network, right? It's idiosyncratic in its own way. So then you're going to see more and more kind of like eventual landing spot of kind of like constraining the set of developers or applications to be strictly sector specific. So this means that for Injective's case, it retains the fully decentralized nature of all the applications being built on top, without any type of single operator assumptions, or any type of specific single actor trust assumptions. But at the same time, the overall infrastructure and ecosystem will naturally evolve and optimize for this specific class or this specific vertical of applications, without losing out on the composability and the kind of like advantageous properties of building within a generalized environment. And I think it's eventually going to be kind of this implicit landscape for any type of generalized environment, or for any type of environment that's not let's say like Ethereum, etc. And that's simply because they're all going to have to find their specific vertical, whether that be one or multiple of developers or applications or projects that they're going to be highly optimized for, that developers just love operate within, and scale that way. And for Injective's case, it certainly can be faster, it can be more and more performant, it can be more scalable in the future, but it will always be the most scalable possible environment, or the most performant possible environment, while retaining some of the core properties to satisfy developer needs for this specific class of decentralized finance or financial application developers. And it's because the basic infrastructure does not necessarily try to take care of other vertical projects or other suite of developers. It's certainly like still a viable environment, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be the best possible environment or the most optimized environment. And over time, we can start to see a lot of these different environments spawning up as a result of this, because only by revamping the base layer, only by revamping or changing the EVM layer, or only by kind of changing the consensus property, then you get to see like viable or highly optimized infrastructure for these type of application verticals.
Yeah, totally agree on this. And also, I loved how you said at the beginning. I mean, this was in 2021. This was like very trendy to set up your own EVM copycat without really like a huge advantage compared to all of the other like more established ones. So I think we definitely see the direction here. But now let's talk about the traction speed here, because Astroport launched on Injective. We are seeing that SushiSwap is ready to launch on Say, which is also like following a very similar approach. Then we have seen that Mars Protocol brought an outpost out to the Osmosis blockchain, a blockchain many people were convinced of that they will stick to this very Appchain minimalistic approach. This obviously also changed a little bit. So could you like maybe talk about this catalyzation speed here? So how fast are we moving towards this direction that we see like kind of like blockchain cities, so to speak, that are like tailored to one a specific application group?
I think it's a little bit, there's kind of like two sides to this. One is that, like one of the most amazing thing about like kind of like the sector specific approach, or for Injective's case, it's that it's self-evolving. Any type of integration, any type of new application will eventually drive the base layer infrastructure or network to evolve in ways that will be fitting and fair for the specific vertical. And this type of approach, typically speaking, is always slowly and then suddenly. Obviously, in varying phases. So for Injective's case, for quite a long time in the beginning, there has been a lot of developer adoption or application deployment because first of all, it's a kind of like a specialized environment. Second of all, it utilizes kind of like a fairly optimized smart contract environment, which is Cosmos. And this means that it's not the easiest for developers to rewrite their existing contract. Most importantly, rewrite their secure contract and then deploy. But all those works are kind of being laid kind of like secretly, kind of like laying the foundation for it, and then suddenly everything just starts coming out all at once. So even since mainnet launch, even since the day since the very first day, there has been a lot of base layer primitive they were trying to build from the ground up, and then it's not until probably like this year or the end of last year where you start to see a lot of applications starts coming out to the public spotlight, and start getting a lot of adoption and usage, because it takes time to build, especially for a lot of different types of smaller projects and applications, right? And right now it has been certainly advancing at like lightning speed. I think I don't know, like recently, just to think off the top of my head, for the past week or two or something, there has been the STINJ reward launch, the ArthSwap integration, the Astro integration, the Seller integration, the PIF mainnet deployment, Talos protocol deploying, Elixir deploying, Apollo deploying their new suite, different types of integrations with Tencent Cloud, Google Cloud, whatever, and different types of integration with fiat on-ramps and stuff like that. And it's basically a lot of these existing efforts and groundwork that are being laid upon where it allows a lot of these public kind of like a public reception to be received.
I see. And now that we talked about how all of this is also evolving, I would also like to ask you, like, maybe a little bit more of a controversial question here, but I think this is also like an important part of the discussion here. So, I mean, we see that clearly more and more like dApps are also moving towards this sector-specific thesis, since it also makes sense for them because they see, hey, that's the perfect infrastructure to launch on. I mean, Astroport was, I believe, also thinking the same here. But yeah, how does the competition look like here? I mean, we are all in Cosmos, right? We all, like each other. That's crystal clear. But at the end of the day, you need to attract developers, but also TVL. You need to attract users. Because yeah, if no one is using the applications being built on top of the blockchain, then there's not, much that this would be worth. So could you like maybe talk a little bit about how this competition landscape looks right now in terms of fighting for trading volume, TVL, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think this is what's great about like being sector specific rather than being in a generalized environment, because you always see a lot of these competitions, and it's honestly very very fierce amongst layer ones trying to kind of approach and trying to kind of convince or bring on the same set of developers, the same set of projects to deploy on top of them, and to build out their ecosystem, etc. And whenever there's such a competitive environment, you always see projects doing like multi-chain deployments and stuff like that, to ensure that that they capture a user base to hedge out uh, uh, um, their risk. And the great thing about sector specific blockchain is that it's sector specific, so everyone can focus on their own vertical, without having to go head to head against a lot of ecosystem out there. And there's a lot of reason for for example, right now we're getting a lot of Solana project deployments because of the Cascade launch, etc. And it's highly synergetic because it's advantageous to them. It's not kind of decoupling their community, their existing community within Solana, etc. And we're more than welcome for any type of like cross deployment for different types of projects. And I think overall, like the most important thing about all these environments is that sector specific blockchains can be highly synergetic, and composability and interoperability is one of the most important, or one of the most critical kind of cornerstone for these type of blockchains, because it can't be like a generalized environment where it tries to kind of bootstrap everything from the ground up. It needs to in order for it to truly demonstrate its value proposition and to really scale as a ecosystem, it needs to connect with as many kind of other layer ones or ecosystems out there. So I think it's much less so about like competition, but rather more about like collaboration, and how can liquidity be synergized, and how can everyone can build together and to work with each other to create the best possible user experience for a rapidly growing ecosystem or industry.
Yeah, this is very lovely. I mean, it's completely different to the Fed protocol thesis that a lot of people like pushed in the past. Yeah, I'm really a fan of this, and I think this really fits perfectly well into the narrative that the Cosmos ecosystem is approaching here. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about developers. You were like mentioning, okay, in the past, these layer ones, these general EVM layer ones, they were fighting for the same group of people. But now, how's the situation now with you attracting developers? Are you like looking for developers to directly and exclusively building or starting at least in the Injective ecosystem, or are you like more looking into the strategy of attracting existing dApps to also move on Injective? And yeah, what would be your convincing argument for a developer to eventually launch on Injective?
I think the interesting part here is that we welcome everyone, regardless of their approach, but there's simply one like kind of like expectation, or one encouragement, is that we do want developers to build unique applications that are not possible on any other environment. And this means that basically it doesn't make sense for them to build the exact same offering, utilize like, nothing that exists on top of the Injective base layer infrastructure, or protocols are very unique to Injective, um, and just deploy their own application and call it a day. I think what we look for, and what we always encourage developers to do, is to leverage all the advantages, and to build really bleeding edge, and really like innovative, never before seen applications that are only enabled, or that are only possible on top of Injective. And there's certainly a lot of them. As a matter of fact, for the longest time, and I think that this is still the case to this day, um, we us from the lab side, we never really tried to create a lot of grant initiatives, or developer incentives, etc., or any type of outreach to get the raw number count of developers to be deployed on top of Injective. But one thing that we do focus very intensely on is finding developers and letting developer reach out to us, because they see that this is the only possible environment for them to build like their unique product offering, or their protocol offering. And historically, this has always been uh, the the initial community that is aggregated on top of Injective. Starting from something as early as Frontrunner, and even to this day to like Astroport, which is contributing liquidity directly on top of Injective into the on-chain order book, to build much more capital efficient, and much higher yield for general users. This is simply like what we look at, what we look for. And yeah, I would say like there's not a lot of hey, like let's get a bunch of developers to build this and build that, but rather we want developers to come reaching out to us and say like, hey, I want to build this. It's not possible on top of Ethereum. It's not possible on top of scaling solutions like Arbitrum, Optimism, or Solana. But this is going to be a very, very disruptive tool, or primitive, or project. It's going to be very much groundbreaking, and Injective is the only possible environment.
Yeah, this is very, very interesting. And now I want to like dive a little bit deeper. You mentioned you want to have unique projects launching on Injective, and that are just possible to launch on a blockchain like Injective, like in this unique style, so to speak. But now with Astroport, let's start talking about Astroport here again. I mean, it used to be the former a former dApp on Terra. So my question now is, I mean, Terra. I mean, Astroport was on Terra before. So in terms of uniqueness, it's like the Astroport launch, like representing what you just mentioned in terms of uniqueness.
Yeah, so actually, the Astroport team is rolling out, the Injective unique version of it, which is contributing, orders and liquidity directly on top of, the Injective shared liquidity order book layer, and this basically allows them to augment, the yield from the AMM, and also prevent a lot of impermanent loss, and also, allow for much more concentrated and capital efficient liquidity. This is certainly one. We more than welcome Astroport to deploy on top of on as many destinations as possible. But I think one of the most exciting thing about the Astroport deployment is that they're doing something that is only possible on top of Injective, and it'll bring a much better user experience. It'll bring a much better a financial profile and environment for the same set of community within Astroport.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, like, what are your expectations now? Like, are there any traceable numbers, or like or something where you would say, okay, this is what we can expect from the Astroport launch, maybe in terms of user bases, or in terms of TVL inflow? So yeah, what are you looking at there?
Yeah, I think it's really about like once you move away from kind of like the Ethereum DeFi infrastructure, a lot of KPI becomes very, very unique. Essentially, I think like the whole notion about like TVL really comes from the fact that basically it's a proxy towards liquidity, it's a proxy towards adoption. But at the same time, for example, Uniswap V3 liquidity and versus Uniswap V2 liquidity historically is significantly lower. And yet at the same time, they provide much more effective liquidity. They provide a lot more volume. So I don't think a TVL increase is going to be like the sole indicator of success for, let's say, like Astroport's case, right? It's really about the effective liquidity that they bring within a 1 to 2% spread, the volume that they got from providing liquidity, and the overall like synergetic environment for the Injective exchange ecosystem.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting take. Yeah, quick question in regards to that. So, what do you think is or what is for Injective more important here? Is it TVL or trading volume? Like, what are you approaching?
I think it's certainly not TVL because basically the more capital people put on top of the chain, it basically means that this capital is not being put into good use. Having like 10 billion or like 100 billion TVL doesn't really mean anything if it's not offering like a superior user experience or a superior liquidity level compared to like centralized counterparts. Let's say for Binance's entire order book, there's only 10 or 20 million or maybe like 100 million for a single market, and at the same time Ethereum needs 500 million or even a billion to achieve the same level of liquidity depth for like a fraction of the volume. And this is certainly not like a successful case. And I think for Injective case, it's not only just about the organic and discretionary volume that carries through the ecosystem, but also about the overall like user base, and also like all the different types of applications are enabled by it.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense, and also a very interesting way to look at TVL actually. But yeah, let's talk about another topic. I would be interested in getting like an update. So at Cosmos 2022, you introduced the community to Project X. So could you maybe repeat real quick what Project X is all about and how things are going with Project X?
Yeah. So for a lot of community members are very, very active or like highly involved. They might have already checked out Project X and already tested out the upcoming beta, and they also might have a little bit extra alpha about like what Project X looks like now, what is the new name or like the final name, etc. So perks of being active within the community for sure. And so basically like in like a few sentences, Project X is this ecosystem of on-chain strategy and vaults, where developers and different types of projects can create on-chain strategies that allows for people to subscribe and utilize in a pool model. And on top of that layer is kind of like a set of initial or like genesis vaults or strategies that has very significant advantage and very advanced properties compared to traditional liquidity provisioning or on-chain strategy. One of which is a highly capital efficient on-chain market making that doesn't have any impermanent loss, that provides superior liquidity for more enhanced yield. And then another thing is using that same type of foundational model, you can also apply that to token launches, which allows for a direct listing process similar to traditional market for kind of like a healthy or natural price discovery, and allow everyone to acquire it at like a fair price without much significant volatility. Also, a much better fundraising tool compared to a lot of the traditional auctioning mechanisms. And then on top of that, there's also different types of simple auctioning mechanisms like Dutch, English, out of the box. And I think for a testnet, people get to try out a lot of these strategies and see kind of these faults in play within testnet for the first time.
I see. Yeah, I think this is very exciting to know here. And speaking of like products using on Injective, I think there's another key product that is worth mentioning here, in contrast to Project X, which is Helix. And it's being stated that this is one of the key apps on Injective. So could you like also walk us through here as well how things are going with Helix?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of really exciting news around Helix coming up. And if I spoil the surprise now, I think marketing is going to kill me. So, but historically, Helix has been very, very successful. I think it accumulated over $9.3 billion in trading volume for last year or so. Also, reached, I think, roughly like 20 or $27 million in deposits, and created liquidity that's similar to, I don't know, like 500 million within traditional AMMs, and also contributed to roughly like $5.6 million in INJ burned. And on top of that, with a lot of upcoming improvements and feature integrations, and there's a lot of exciting projects on top of Injective that came out of the hackathon, such as Island, etc., that allows for money market or lending that Helix will be integrating with, that will be adopting, and it'll also synergize very, very well with Project X, etc.
Yeah, we will dive deeper into this. We will dive deeper into this in a second. Also talking about the hackathon. But like one lovely sentence, there was one lovely sentence I really wanted to pick up from your keynote at Cosmos 2022 before wrapping the interview up with all of these exciting developments that are going on. Is you mentioned that for Injective, interoperability is not only about assets, but also about data. Could you like elaborate on this a little bit?
Sorry, I didn't catch the last word.
Could you elaborate on this?
Oh,
on
no,
this
sorry,
sentence?
the one before.
Yeah. So you mentioned at Cosmoverse 2022 during your keynote that for Injective, interoperability is not only about assets, but also about data.
Oh, data. Yeah. So basically, like one of the most interesting property for Injective or for any type of like DeFi primitives, but much more augmented for Injective, is that all the data for trading, for order book, for liquidity, for all these market properties are all kind of for the first time very much transparent and displayed to the public. And this means that the open positions, open interest, order book liquidity, order book dynamic, the account specific activity, etc., are all kind of accessible to the public with sometimes as simple as a single like a SQL query or whatever. And this means that it'll unearth a huge, it'll create like a huge community or like a huge ecosystem of on-chain signals and strategies, and really level the playing field for, like a one-man shop trying to be like a sophisticated algorithmic trader versus like a $100 billion like proprietary trading firm market maker having completely different kind of like informational access. And yeah, like this is going to be one of the most interesting part. And as a matter of fact, that for Project X's case, it utilizes a lot of these interesting data that's available on chain, and that's completely not possible on top of Ethereum virtual machine environment to execute sophisticated strategies and everything. And then there's also a lot of different components that allows for additional external data access. One of the interesting ones would be the synergizing with a lot of the existing exciting work around artificial intelligence, like LLMs and stuff like that, for additional enhancement on top of signaling and also models for Project X.
Nice. And yeah, to wrap things up, because we're getting closer to the hour, You mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. You also hosted a hackathon. There are like interesting things going on with Helix. Astroport just launched. So yeah, my question, what is next and what can we look forward to? Are there any important updates that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think there's just been, like a new, very exciting news coming out like every day or every other day. I think, there's also a very, very exciting, news that's coming up in a few days for, algorithmic traders, where, Hummingbot integrates with Injective, and, people can immediately spin out a strategy in a few lines of code, utilizing Hummingbot. And then on top of that, a lot of really exciting, integrations, deployments, that are coming up. I think there has been a lot of existing hints from some of the top projects on top of Solana or Ethereum, and then I would say like a lot of the existing a lot of the existing players within traditional tech or different types of service providers integrating with Injective chain for fiat on ramp for data access for cloud, etc. Those are all coming up as well. So I think the easiest way is to follow the Injective Twitter and stay tuned.
Yeah, 100%. And as always, you can find all of the necessary information in the description below. And with that being said, Eric, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all of these amazing updates with us. Also, thanks for diving deeper with us into the sector-specific blockchain thesis. And I think exciting times lie ahead in the Cosmos ecosystem and beyond in regards to the sector-specific blockchain thesis. Again, thanks for joining, and I hope to see you soon and at latest at Cosmoverse.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.